Another browser requirement for the dashboard here, for the CSA dashboard, it's like Google Chrome. Well, again, it's one of the more um, well-used browsers, so I'm guessing this doesn't pose a challenge, right? But in terms of the resource utilization and other aspects, it's very minimal, right? So I don't believe that would pose any challenge when the resources in terms of memory and all that is much higher these days on any resource you use, right? Anyway, so these prerequisites are there, but I'm betting that they are more easily met. Before we jump too deep, I just want to call out that the supported runtimes for CSA are what's listed here: Java, .NET Core, .NET Framework, and Node.js, right? So if you do have some other agent, unfortunately, yeah, the CSA doesn't help you there. And again, for these four runtimes, the functionality which will be provided by the CSA will be the vulnerable library detection, right? It will be able to detect the vulnerabilities in the library and then list them. If you have Java runtimes, you actually get more benefits using CSA. It actually is able to detect and not just detect, protect your application also from attacks, right? So I just want to call this out. So if you have some other agent, unfortunately, CSA is not applicable for you. Okay. I know most enterprise applications though would use uh, one or more of these four runtimes. All right, so we'll jump straight into a little bit more of the requirements and how easy it is to enable CSA. Yeah, the first step, as always is the case, you got to have a license, right? So yeah, so that's a requirement, and some of you may already have a CSA license based on any bundle that you may have gotten, right? So I also understand that some of you are in this webinar are folks who actually have the license but may not have started CSA. And I'm just here to let you know, if you have a license, it's very easy. If you don't have a license, please contact our account team. They'll be happy to give you uh, a trial version which you can play with. All right. And let's say that you have a license, just a couple of steps needed to enable CSA, right? First, you need to assign roles or permissions to users, which are there are only two permissions for related to CSA. You just use the AppDynamics console as you normally do, right? As a user of AppDynamics, you would have already created users, assigned permissions. You just assign two new permissions related to CSA. And sometimes it's just one of those two, right? That's as simple as that because you're familiar with the AppD role assignment console. Now, the next thing is basically checking a checkbox, as simple as that, you see, right? You just go to click through a couple of times, go to security events dashboard, settings. Yes, there are a couple of clicks here, and then, you hit a checkbox. This is how you enable it for all your applications. And as it says here, by default, it's off. Right. So now, as you notice, I'm going to quickly zip through this. These requirements, though present, are more likely to be automatically met given that you are on CSAS, right? And most enterprise applications use one or more of these runtimes. So you're covered, right? CSA is likely to work for you. And then once you get the license, it's a matter of just assigning the permissions to the users and then enabling CSA. It's as simple as that, right? I hope that is convincing enough to understand that you don't need any prior knowledge. You don't have to deploy anything, no new agent, right? Uh, just getting going with CSA is easy, right? So, hoping that you're sold on that, I'm going to introduce the Cisco Secure app, just talk a little bit more about it. Okay. So, quickly, it's an application security tool. CSA is an application security tool. Identify the vulnerabilities in an application library, right? And again, we'll see more as to how it actually displays that. The second part is how it helps prevent attacks, okay? How it prevents attacks. when the attacks happens in real time in your production environment, right? And the third bullet point here is the more important, key differentiator, right? So now, before I talk about that, let me just give you what these are. So the class of security tools which do this, identify vulnerabilities, they are called SCA tools, software composition analysis tools. The tools that help protect the application are called runtime application self-protection tools. Okay. Now, there may be other runtime application self-protection tools, RASP tools, but what is the key differentiator of CSA, right? The CSA, because it is piggybacking on the APM, right? The APM agent, it is able to provide the business impact, provide you the business context, and correlate the security risk with the business impact and the business context, right? So now again, if you have a standalone RASP tool, right? Let's say that's which is not part of an APM, there is no way it'll give you the business context because it doesn't understand what is business in there. It understands the application, perhaps, that's it, right? So anyway, so that is the key differentiator. Now, what is more? It enables collaboration of different personas, right? Security, IT ops, DevSecOps, SRE, on a same pane of glass, right? So basically, everybody looks at the same thing, and I'll show that during a demo here, right? That is again another benefit which is not typically possible in RASP tools which are isolated. Just do RASP. It's not alongside something which provides you the business context. So these are the key differentiators of CSA compared to, say, some other pure play security tool. All right. All right. Getting to the next one. I'm going to give a quick context. We kind of dived into, like, say, we said, hey, CSA, introduction, all that. But we want to give this context of what is CSA, right? CSA is part of the full stack observability platform. And the full stack observability platform at a broad level, it's made up of performance monitoring and optimization, which is a relatively newer area, and then security, right? And several personas use this full stack observability, and CSA is the security component for the full stack observability platform. I'm just trying to give the big picture as to where CSA fits in with respect to FSO. And more about that, full stack observability provides you end-to-end visibility, right? Right from network, right? You dive into the application, and in the application, you can drill it from the managed application to the tier, and from the tier to the nodes. Now, if you were to look at just the application itself, you can look at from the application to the services, to the class, to the method, and the code, line of code, in order to be able to troubleshoot and get that insight. Now, from within the application, we can actually get insight into the security of the application. And we can actually look at it two ways, right? One, from the AppD managed application standpoint, where you look at the managed application security, and then the tiers, security of the tiers, and the security at the node level. That's one way. But if you just look at regular application world, you kind of look at the application security and then the security of the libraries that are used by the application, right? And of course, the class and the method and the line of code where there is a security issue, right? So that's how the full stack observability provides end-to-end visibility. And security is one part of this end-to-end visibility which the FSO platform provides. Just wanted to kind of share with you as to where the CSA fits in as part of the full stack observability. Now, I'm going to give a brief overview of the Cisco Secure Apps architecture. Again, just a brief overview because this is getting started. This is not deep dive. Deep dive is on April 25th. All right. So I want to just highlight key points here. The first and most important key point is with CSA, you don't have to install any new agent. Why? Because it's part of the APM agent. You can kind of say, hey, it's bundled with the APM agent or it's part of the APM agent. Well, so kind of one and the same. The key point for you is you don't have to deploy anything. That's the key, right? So the CSA agent or the APM agent, as does the APM agent, communicates with the controller backend, right? So that is not going to change, but it so happens that the Cisco Secure Application Service, which is also in the backend, okay, it indirectly communicates it with that through the controller, right? And the CSA service interfaces with external data feeds in order to bring your security CSA feature. Okay. So the last thing here is the Cisco Secure Application Dashboard, which is a kind of conspicuous dashboard because it's security related, but from the standpoint of look and feel and all that, it flows pretty well with the rest of the AppD dashboard. Anyway, so that's the overview of the Cisco Secure App architecture. The key point to note there is that there is no new agent installation deployment. Um, you just leverage what you have. If you have the APM agent, that's it. All right, so the Cisco Secure Application, it provides security across the entire life cycle of an application. And what I mean by that is you can actually have your CSA in your development, testing, staging, and get to know about the vulnerabilities sooner in the cycle rather than later, right? Importantly, it provides business and application insights to prioritize security issues, and we'll see how. We'll see in the demo and actually in the subsequent slides as well as to how that happens. So now, the most importantly, it provides you a single pane of glass without conflicts between different roles because they all look at the same information about security. Instead of being siloed, they're able to collaborate because they look at all the personas look at the same pane of glass. So CSA helps you secure data, API code, library, and so forth. And we'll talk about these more later on. Now, folks who are familiar with AppDynamics would be well aware that we talk about personas when we talk about different functionality in AppDynamics. So one such persona is IT ops, right? So again, their primary focus obviously is about user experience and availability, but that's not to say that they are not keen about security. Yeah. So if we make them aware of security issues, surface them at the same dashboard, the same page they are looking at anyways, it is only going to help. If you have a culture where security is everybody's business, then it helps the IT ops folks to share that awareness with the right people, call the attention to it in an effort to actually address problems sooner, right? See, SecOps and AppSec people related to security, they have their own challenges. The security apps folks typically would want to know everything about security, which is a boon and a bane, right? Because if you want to know everything, there is data overload, too much noise, right? Now, but as long as the tool provides a way to filter out noise and tailor those alerts to be sent to specific tools where it is more of a signal than a noise, then yeah, it helps. CSA is one such tool where you can have configure alerts to any output of your liking, any software, SIEM software, integrate with that. So basically, you don't have to, you get the information, but avoid the noise. If you're an AppSec person, which at some point I've been, a developer who's focused on fixing security issues, the challenge always is which issue to fix first. You know, because there are always a lot more security issues than what you can actually fix. Now, if that is a way to provide insight into which is the riskiest, right? Which will give you the biggest bang for the buck, then that is what you would prioritize, and CSA provides that insight, right? Now, as mentioned earlier, AppDynamics provides a single dashboard which helps all personas, right? By looking at the same dashboard, not different tools, not different pages, different windows, you can actually get the security context surfaced to you and collaborate and thereby expedite fixes, security fixes which will improve the security posture of the organization. Okay. All right. So with that, we basically kind of introduced you all to CSA, and we're going to jump into business risk observability. Right now, typically, when security folks want to assess risk, they use something called as a CVSS system, a CVSS score. So this is a score that has been there for, I don't know, several years, more than a decade, and it's pretty much an industry standard. But it has some flaws. The thing is, it is basically a severity based rating and scoring system. Yeah, scoring of 10 is high, but it's purely technical severity based. It does not contain a risk measure. So, what does that mean? It doesn't take into consideration probability. Okay. So, now let me share with you for security folks who are probably aware of this already. For others, there are two elements that go into risk. So, one is called impact, another is called likelihood, right? If you have low impact and low likelihood, then the risk is low. When you have high likelihood and high impact, then the risk is high. Okay? So, unfortunately, the CVSS system doesn't have an element of risk. Okay. So now that's exactly what CSA overcomes. It overcomes that by virtue of integrating with three different Cisco security suites, right? One is the Cisco Talos, another is Cisco Kenna, which is now called the Cisco Vulnerability Management, and Cisco Panoptica, right? So with respect to the CVSS score, which I mentioned earlier, the Cisco Kenna incorporates the CVSS score as one of the about 10 inputs it takes, uses data science, AI, and ML, and takes into account the potential impact, the likelihood of the issue occurring, and comes up with a separate score called the Kenna score, right? And the Talos provides you insight about the attackers and the threat. The Panoptica integration provides you with insight into third-party APIs, whether they are compliant, whether they are secure, right? So the point here is, rather than using the CVSS score, which is only providing the technical severity, not something which will have risk, these three integrations provide a lot more insight. Again, during the demo, we look at it more on how they provide that insight. So again, the Cisco Talos, real quick, it's one of the top 10 or 15 threat intelligence organizations in the world. And again, using the power of Talos, leveraging that through CSA gives you benefit. And with respect to Cisco Kenna, it uses AI, ML, and data science. As I was saying, the CVSS score, it uses CVSS score as one of the inputs and applies, vulnerability intelligence and other factors to actually come up with a score which includes the risk. Okay. So again, I'm just mentioning these as I go because this is supposed to be getting started. If you want to know more about these integrations, then you'd probably want to go into this deep dive session we'll have on April 25th. So the third thing we are looking at, third integration, is the API insights, security insights provided by the Panoptica integration, right? So let me explain as to how this goes, right? So if you're using a third-party API, right, and you're not very sure as to how secure it is, the interfaces and all that, even in your development environment, in your test environment, when you're testing this, your Panoptica integration provides the insight about the third-party API and kind of evaluates it with respect to how secure it is, how compliant it is. So now at that point, if it is not as secure or compliant, then you have options, right? Which are you can basically check with them as to what the roadmap is and saying, hey, this is being flagged for the fact that you guys are using only TLS 1.0, right? And is that going to be the case, or are you going to go to the latest and greatest TLS, right? And you don't see that in the roadmap, and you have a comparable third-party API which is actually on it, well, you are able to switch it right then, right? So, so that's how the Panoptica API security insights provided by the integration helps you. All right, so now we talked about business risk observability. That's the section we are looking at, right? So we said CVSS score. We said can our score improves that CVSS score by taking CVSS score as one of the inputs and applying a lot of data science, AI, ML, and all that other factors and data, and comes up with another score. So now we are coming up with yet another score called the business risk score, right? So the business risk score takes into account the information from these three integrations that we talked about, the Talos integration, the Kena integration, the Panoptica integration. In addition, it takes into account the AppDynamics integration, the fact that CSA is on AppDynamics, the notion and the knowledge of business transaction, right, to help provide that business context. In addition, if it is your Java runtime, right, the runtime behavior, which is the RASP feature, that also provides you input into exploitation risk, whether the exploit happened, how many attacks are coming in. All these inputs feed into what is called as the business risk score. Now, so this is the key differentiator which I was mentioning earlier, which is not possible in standalone security tools which don't have the business context. And why is the business context important? When you're trying to evaluate risk, you need to tie it to what affects your business the most, and which is the business context, and which helps you prioritize, get the biggest bang for the buck, right? From the standpoint of security. All right, so given that I mentioned that there are three integrations, I just want to make something very clear, right? So one is, as part of this, you are of course paying for the license for CSA, but you're not paying for Talos, Kena, or Panoptica, right? Nor are you having to install, configure these three suites. Nope, you don't have to. You basically get the value from these integration, which CSA has with these tools, surfaced through CSA to provide you a lot more value than what CSA alone would otherwise do, right? Now, but again, it's important to also call it out here, right? The CSA license doesn't kind of give you, access directly to these three suites, because these are full-fledged security suites by themselves. So you basically get the features which are exposed through CSA. You're not buying these three suites, just to make it clear. All right. So now we're going to jump into the reporting and integration, soon after which we'll jump right into the demo, right? All right. So you see, the security folks can look at the dashboard, but the way it typically happens in real world, being a security person, I can share that with you, is, they typically have their own dashboards to which, they want the data to be fed in, right? So now that's exactly what CSA allows you to do. You can configure alerts and actions, and then it can go to any random HTTP endpoint that you have, because it's HTTP REST API based integration. You could basically integrate with any tool of your choice, right? So that's something which is provided. In addition, even from the dashboard, if you want to basically download the list of, say, the vulnerabilities listed here, there is an option basically just to select all these and then export it in the JSON format, the CSV format, so you can get data that way. And in addition to these, we do have a vertical integration with Splunk. Yes, we had this integration even before Splunk became part of Cisco. So as you probably know, Splunk is part of Cisco now, and most security organizations do use Splunk. And CSA is already integrated with Splunk. So that's about the integration. And I mentioned how you would go about integrating, like with any HTTP endpoint. These steps are pretty simple, and I'll see whether we have time for running through this in the demo, though this is typically meant for the advanced session. So basically, you just need to go to the alert screen, click on the actions, you type HTTP, and then what type of event you want, whether you want a vulnerability event, business risk event, or an attack event, right? And they choose the method, whether it's post. I think it's the post the only thing which is supported right now, and the authentication right now we have only basic auth supported, and we choose what payload needs to be sent to your HTTP endpoint. Okay, and that's it. You're done with your configuration, and then you'll actually be able to, at the end of the sixth step, you'll actually be able to get the curl, which you can use to test it out yourself. Anyway, so that's how the integration is facilitated in CSA with any arbitrary software which you want to integrate it with. And as I mentioned earlier, right, we have kind of a tight integration with Splunk. Even before we kind of provided the generic HTTP integration, and it's again providing three inputs. That's it. Choose the service type, host, and the token generated by Splunk, and you're done, right? Let's go to settings screen, add new connection, and that's it. This is quite literally what it takes to configure, nothing more, right? It's comprehensive here. All right, so with that, I'm going to jump straight into a quick demo. Um, Again, we'll not go deep into the demo. I'm just going to escape here and all right. So before I go there, I'm going to quickly see whether I'm going to just look at whether there's any questions real quick. Right, I'm going to look at the chat, Q&A. All right, so I'm going to request that any questions you have, this is probably the best time to kind of add them, because once you're done with the demo, we'll quickly jump into the questions, okay? All right, so I'm going to share this again. I haven't. Give me a second. Right, I'm sharing the screen again to quickly go to the demo. Okay, so I'm sharing one of my demo instances here. Right, so we're going to jump into the application. So this is a quick 10-minute demo here. So I'm going to choose AD e-commerce application. I'm intentionally not going into anything securities right away. Here, we're going to go into business transactions. So the idea here is to show to you that the screen and the dashboard that you are most familiar with, right? So if you're an AppDynamics administrator user, then you're most likely to have gone to this screen where you look at business transactions, because business transactions are one of the key entities to monitor in your AppDynamics dashboard. Now, this is something you'll be familiar with. What is new here is because in this instance, we have CSA license and we have enabled CSA as well. So we see something called business risk column here. So that's because CSA is enabled. I'm going to sort this here. And you see the business risk score. The business risk score is 940. It goes from a scale of 0 to 1,000. And the fact that the business risk score of 940 is against a checkout business transaction. The checkout business transaction is typically important because it affects the revenue, the bottom line of a business, right? And here we are saying an important business transaction has a very high business risk. So that's the insight. That is business risk observability, which um, only softwares like CSA, which are part of a application performance monitoring platform or an observability platform, can provide. Standalone RASP software, I don't think they can easily provide, because I don't know where they will get the notion of business transaction from, right? Anyway, so now that we see, hey, there is this high business risk for a business transaction that we care about, which is important, we can double click on that. You see the flow map, which you're all comfortable and familiar with. But what I would like to call your attention to is what is on the right side. It shows the security health. It shows the business risk score. And it also shows two sections here, the vulnerabilities and the attacks. And it has a categorization for the vulnerabilities and For attacks, it says, how many exploits happen, how many were actually blocked. Remember, I mentioned that CSA is a RASP tool, runtime application self-protection tool, which means it can protect your application, right? Not just tell you, hey, it got attacked, it got exploited. Not just that. If you actually put in the right rules and policies, it can actually prevent attacks, right? So that's what it is saying here. And here it is attempted, and then see, two attempted, two blocked. And for these, perhaps there were no policies trying to prevent it, right? But again, now that you know, you can go ahead and prevent it. Come up with a policy here, all right? Anyway, so now I'm going to click on this, or I can go here. I wanted to just call your attention to the fact that there is a new tab called security here, which you may not see unless you have CSA license and enabled security. So one way is to go here directly, but I'm here to show how you can collaborate with your peers with IT ops, SecOps, and AppSec, right? So you're IT ops person, sorry, you're looking at it. This is the screen which you use, visit all the time. And then you look at this and they say security health. Oh, wow. Business risk is 940. That sounds bad. Okay. And you're going to just click on that. And boom, then you are in the Cisco Secure Application dashboard, right under the business transaction. And you're drilling into that specific business transaction, the checkout that you are interested in drilling into, right? So, and it has a score. As I said, the score can go from it's also displaying right there where I have the cursor. 1000 is like close to 1000 is critical, 670 to 1000. This is critical. And here is something which I want to do here. I want to call out that these factors are coming from the different integrations that we have. For example, vulnerabilities with high exploitation risk. This is coming from the Cisco Kena integration. Threat activity. This is coming from the integration with Cisco Talos. And in this case, looks like the third-party APIs, there isn't any issue. So you see that is not checked. And this information, whether there is a risk or not, it's coming from the Panoptica integration. Important business transaction. Well, how do I know that? Right? It's part of AppDynamics, and AppDynamics has this notion of business transaction. And the fact that somebody took the time to basically curate a transaction, name it as checkout and all that, and is monitoring it in itself shows it's an important business transaction, right? And then the risk associated with the important business transaction basically adds to the score, right? And then other factors that APM knows, it actually accesses the database, data store, and it's also publicly accessible. Well, publicly accessible means the attack surface is much broader. That's what it means. So all these score is given, and cumulative score is provided here to give you a quantitative number to put you in the best position to prioritize uh, the issue and what to fix, right? So now, as you can see here, it shows all the vulnerabilities related to this checkout, right? So it lists them. It actually has the Kena score, CVS score. So the important thing I want to call out here, see, the CVS score is only 7.5. It's not 10, okay? But the Kena score is 100. See, here is why you need to use the Kena score, because it takes into account the risk, the impact and the likelihood, and thereby the risk incorporated into the score, which the CVSS score cannot, right? That's the value add CSA provides by way of integrating with a Cisco suite, which specializes in vulnerability management, okay, and providing vulnerability insight. And then, as you can see here, with the same checkout transaction, we actually have attacks here. It actually says what all attacks are relevant to this checkout and what is the outcome. There's a log4j attack, it got exploited, and certain things got attempted, but certain things got blocked, right? So this is the insight it provides and puts you in the best position. And if you're wondering, as a security person or a developer, hey, what do I do now though? Okay, I'm sold now. It's 940, it's high, yeah. What should I do? Right there. Top recommended actions. It tells you right there what you need to do, right? So there are several views which are provided here. You can look at it from the business view because you're looking at how to prioritize, or you just want to look at it as a security person would, just look at the bare bones vulnerability list. You can do that. You can just look at the attacks. You can do that too, right? So in the advanced webinar that we would have, I'll dive deeper into how to go about looking at this insights. But right now, I'm going to just show you quickly how you can set a policy by just showing an existing policy. So most of you would be familiar with the log4j issue, which happened about 2.5 years or so ago, right? Um, because of a vulnerability in the log4j open source software, right? The effect of which the vulnerability allowed an attacker basically to open a connection from within your application to an external data source, right? And then basically fetch more malicious code and run that as part of your application, or just deploy it and have it run some other time. Anyway, so that was the issue. Now you see, you can patch it. You can patch it, and that is easier said than done, right? So you need to set aside some time. You need to kind of go through the motion to kind of upgrade. It's easier said than done. So what do you do until then? So you would be exploited. But with CSA, because of the RASP feature, which is the self-protection feature, in the time you take to upgrade, you can still protect your application. The way you do that is you basically come up with a policy which says, a network or socket access policy. And in this case, it's applied to all applications. You can be fine grained here. And default is detect, but here we're saying if the stack trace contains this, which is basically the specific class which is doing the lookup to perform the connection. If it is there, block that connection, right? So this is how it helps prevent an attack. Okay, so I'm going to quickly run through just one or two screens here. This alert, we talked about the 6 steps to create an alert and integrate. I'm going to just show you something here. So there are 6 steps. I'm going to go through this real quick. So you can actually configure an alert to integrate with an external system and also send the data that you want to as a payload, right?